We're all set.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Ms. Casman, that's right.
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Mr. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Gouzier.
Here.
Ms. Hyde.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Ms. Ori.
Here.
Okay. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With participation, Denise, would you like to read our?
Do we want to do that in the regular meeting? Does it matter?
Oh,
It does
yes. Do we have anything regarding this particular topic? The PSRP union contract?
I haven't seen any
Okay.
public comment.
Okay, thank you. All right. Then we will bypass that. And then, do we need, so everyone, do we need to adjourn to closed session to discuss either of the, well, I guess just the one item, the PSRP union contract? Do you want to have a discussion about that in closed session before we vote, or are you comfortable with voting on it? I'll say, speak up if you want to have closed session before we vote on it, and then come back to the open meeting.
Is there anything that's changed since the last discussion?
No.
Okay.
Okay, is everyone else comfortable? Okay, great. Then I'd like to move that we approve the PSRP one-year contract as presented.
Second.
Any discussion from anyone?
I'd like to thank Brendan and Audrey, Mrs. Ori, for participating in that from the board and going through that. This was the first time that we negotiated any contracts via Zoom. So it was an interesting dialogue and different, and everybody adjusted quite well, and it worked. It worked. We got it done. So I thought it went pretty well and was relatively efficient.
Yeah, and thank you to, of course, Brendan, Audrey. Thank you also to administration. I know you guys put a lot of time into meeting with everybody and making sure that everyone is on the same page. And I'd like to thank the union as well, and our PSRP represented staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Then
happy.
roll call, please, Monica.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Gouzier.
Yes.
Ms. Hyde.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Ori.
Yes.
Ms. Thomas, right?
Yes. Congratulations, guys. All right, on to item B. Go for it, Denise.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval for the purchase of office personal protective equipment in the amount of $10,453.
Second.
Do we have discussion on this? Any questions?
Just a quick question for confirmation. This is going to be paid for by the Federal CARES Act? Yes. Funds? Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else?
Actually, I did not hear Sean's question or comment.
This is going to be paid for by the Federal CARES Act funding, the grant that we received.
Yes, the way I read that, that was in total, correct?
Right, which is, I just wanted clarification.
Anyone that's the whole 10,453 that's coming from the federal government, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Bouvier,
Yes.
Ms. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Early,
Is she ringing the doorbell?
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Casvon Tourette,
Yes.
Mr. Conan.
Yes.
Okay, there being no further business for the special meeting. If you're watching at home, we are going to move from this special meeting because we had a couple of pressing items to approve right now. And we're going to go into the committee of the whole meeting, which is a discussion only meeting with no action items. So there being no further business, I'd like to move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. On to the next meeting. Dispense with the roll call. And the pledge. As much as we love our pledge, we've done it. And then Denise, if you could please start public comment, I appreciate that.
Gretchen Tolenzani, who's a teacher here at Melbourne. President of the BOE. This statement is a personal one and not necessarily reflective of the opinions of my team or other colleagues at Melbourne 24. I am aware. I am aware of what President Trump, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, and Governor Pritzker, and even the American Academy recommend. I am aware that parents clean their salary and want their children in class and back to a somewhat normal routine. It is vital to their social and emotional health, with which I wholeheartedly agree. It is essential for teachers as well. There is nothing that we want more than to be back with our kids. I am also aware that the virus is still very much in working. Get the students back to in-person learning, but at what risk? Just how much actual learning is going to be taking place? Will it be worth it? Any plan to reopen can look viable on paper, but execution of a plan, in my opinion, will be different, if not impossible. Returning to school, whatever it looks like, will expose staff to hundreds of children and potentially thousands of household contacts. Exposure equals risk. Your reopening plan must surely include hiring additional cleaning staff to keep up. Teachers cannot be expected to execute that feat. Imagine trying to physically distance 20 or even 10 kindergartners. Imagine teaching while masked and taking care that they all keep their masks on properly and sanitize appropriately. Effective teaching and class management require proximity. I foresee a management nightmare. Imagine packing away all the manipulatives, toys, and books because they can't share anything. Introducing the iPads immediately, even though it is so developmentally inappropriate. But we have to prep them for the remote learning that is sure to come. Imagine getting down the hallway, if just out to the bus, will be a logistical nightmare. Class of 20 properly distanced would be a line of 120 feet long. Your reopening plan will surely include hiring additional support staff to effectively manage just moving through the hallways. Imagine a child throws up or wets his pants. What to do? Take him to the nurse, but wait. There are a couple of kids with possible COVID and they're waiting for their parents to pick them up. And she's dispensing meds for another and checking on a diabetic child's blood sugar. Quite certainly your reopening plan will include hiring additional nurses. I think that what works for the upper grades just isn't viable for early childhood, unless additional safeguards are put into place. The devil is in the details. And the details right now are quite overwhelming. I guess I'm asking, can we guarantee the safety of our school community if we return full on school? Will the quality of learning taking place under such stressful circumstances be worth the risk? Do I think remote teaching children, especially our youngest learners, is the best solution? Absolutely not. It is far from ideal, but we are blessed in this community because our kids all have access to a device. I'm just going to leave that there. This is a whole other issue for another day. Gloom and doom or reality check. Whatever plan the district puts forward, I know that your teachers will undoubtedly and wholeheartedly rise to the challenge to the best of their ability. That is what we do. But take care that you are not asking the impossible.
Thank you, Mrs. Polenzani, for that. Do we have any more public comments?
Nothing that's coming yet.
Okay. As everyone is probably might know by now, we always take in public comments. As a board, we don't comment on the public comments. We tend to get back to people individually rather than comment in the meeting. So thank you for, but we take seriously every comment that comes to us, and we invite public comments always. Thank you. I did not receive any addition of information to discussion items. So on to the first reading of board policies. Sean, when you guys went through this, did you find anything that you wanted to flag for us?
Yeah. I pulled up. I see that Jason, I believe you have some comments too.
Possibly, but it's been a while.
Yeah, 2 different font colors. So there's one that we really should look at, and that's 420, 4-20. That's related to the fund balance. And then the next is 4-30, and that has to do with the policy talking about, like the chief investment officer. So it's really just a matter of identifying for ours the correct title. Other than that,
There's one on insurance that talks about 9th graders, 9 through 12.
9 through 12, that should be removed, yeah. It doesn't apply to us.
Is that for 100, Dr. Johns?
Yes, 4.100.
Just making notes for.
Policy includes recommendation of catastrophic insurance for athletes 9 through 12. Not athletes.
So the fund balance, should we start with the fund balance one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we have a way of projecting the fund balance one?
The-
fund balance policy, so that everybody
Uh,
literally all be on the same page.
Yeah, I think it's important to tie this to some real numbers.
I agree.
For that too.
Yeah, that one's not listed on our agenda. 4:30.
Is it under 410?
No,
Okay. We just have a few that aren't on them.
I just looked at section 4 in its entirety.
Oh, I
okay.
gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
428:30, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so I see, all right. So we don't have to cover those tonight, 10, 15, 40. 100 is mentioned, however, and that specifies insurance for athletes in 9 through 12. So that, just that section should be removed.
Mhm.
Of these others, that was it. That's
Great.
the only thing that is, I thought, considered material. And Dr. John.
So, but we will bring up the others next time. So could we please put those on the agenda for first reading
Yeah.
next time?
I see 4-20, 4-30.
Because I think it's good that we bring those up.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
understand
for
what the
sure.
true numbers are, because, we've talked in percentages. Let's understand what the real number is and see what's attainable.
And based on, what accounting system. And
Mhm.
yeah, I agree. Does anybody have any questions for the ones that are here and listed? The
Allergies.
other ones that we discussed. The other ones that were discussed, we will bring up next time in a first reading for next time. But does anybody have any questions on the policies that are listed and updated here? Then is it okay for people to email you, Sean, if they have questions?
Yeah, and
Moving
then there's
forward.
also comments. Jason had originally made a spreadsheet that's posted out on the shared drive. And the BOE policy notes, dash Jason.
Mhm.
So you can see there are 2 columns, notes and recommended action.
So are you wanting people just to review that, or?
Yeah, take a look at that. I mean, I really think that there's nothing really material in any of those other than those 3.
Great. So if you have any questions moving forward, feel free to email Sean, or you can even stay with them till the next meeting and we can all discuss it. Thank you. Sean, is Ardre on this too?
Yep.
Yeah, Sean and Ardre. Thank you so much for going through this. Thank you also, Jason. Maintaining board policies is one of our most important things to do. So we so appreciate your time and effort on that. Okay, on to our return to learn plan / remote learning plan update for the fall.
Okay, I will take that away. I will give a brief overview of our current thoughts on returning to learn, and I have a presentation that I will take everyone through as quickly as possible, and then I will be happy to entertain any questions. Sorry, I'm just playing with the, not playing, I am setting up the technology here so that everybody has a fair view of what's happening. There we go. Board, can you see that on the Zoom meeting? Is that
Yeah, we're good.
Milburn return to school update? Perfect. 13 slides to go through, so it's not too bad. This is just a editorial comment on a lot of the discussion lately is on the role of school in our society. And one thing that's become increasingly clear to me is the different role that education has outside of the educational piece in our society versus other points in our history. Thinking back to when my grandpa went to school and had to go into town and be a boarder in order to complete high school, a little different situation than now in trying to complete school, and the impact on our society if school doesn't exist. We need kids to be in school for a variety of reasons. The educational piece is the obvious reason. But the impact on our economy is what's being talked about a lot too. And the ability of parents to educate their kids, and then just how connected we are. I've been thinking about how connected we are across the world, across our country and states, and it's just been fascinating to think about. So I just wanted to comment about that. It's amazing what point in history we're at and how we're experiencing history right now, and our kids are too. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and how we view this 5, 10, 15 years from now, this time period. So that's just a quick editorial. No meaning behind that. Has nothing really to do with our plan to return or not to return or remote learning, but it's just fascinating to me. When we start talking about our return to learn plan, we started talking about our priorities. clearly optimize the wellness of our students, staff, and community, return as many students to school as possible for as long as possible, create a flexible plan that will provide the best experience possible for parents and teachers in any learning setting, and provide a consistent experience across platforms and environment. A lot of that comes from feedback that we got from our thought exchanges with teachers and the parents earlier in June. The process that we use. So how do we tackle this monumental task in a short period of time? So early in June, we started talking about what are we going to do? Well, first you research, we got parent surveys, information, collected information from staff. We had conversations with parents through the COVID conversations on Zoom. We had ISB guidelines to look at. We had the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics guidance. We had many, many, many other sources of guidance. There's tons of guidance out there. We looked at other states, what they're doing. We've looked at other schools, what they're doing. So lots of research into what's best practice for in-person learning and remote learning. Then we brainstormed. We looked again at what other school districts are doing and what might work for us. And we developed a plan. That's the stage we're at now, is the plan development. And now we're starting the process of communicating out that initial plan for additional feedback from parents and from teachers. We'll evaluate and then we'll repeat those steps. We'll go back and research what's best, brainstorm what else can we do, how are we going to overcome these challenges. So it's a cycle, it's an ongoing dynamic process, it's not a static process. The structure of how we accomplished this was through a steering committee. So we decided that to have a steering committee kind of oversee all the different areas so that we could communicate with each other. Having 54 people together in a room or in a Zoom would be pretty tough, or even 30 people. Anything over 6 or 7, you kind of lose discussions. So we wanted to keep our subcommittees small, those smaller groups, break into smaller groups, but then we needed someone to oversight to gather that information, bring it back into an oversight group and talk about it there for the purpose of communication across, vertically, horizontally across our district. So that's what we did. Lots of subgroups, lots of meetings already. Most of them met at least weekly from the beginning of June till today. Safety guidelines, of course, this is very important. This is from the state of Illinois. This is the guidance that we're operating under. They said we can bring in phase 4, the state Illinois Department of Public Health and the school board said you can bring kids back to school. And in fact, they recommend that we do, as long as we can do it under certain conditions. So we must have appropriate personal protective equipment, including face masks, prohibit more than 50 individuals from gathering in one space, require social distancing as much as possible. That's a key word. Require that schools conduct symptom screenings and temperature checks, or recommend individuals self-certify that they're free of symptoms before entering the school building, and require an increase in school-wide cleaning and disinfection. So the guidance document, 64 pages long and has much more detail, but that's the basis that we're operating under, and I won't go into more of that. The big one on there is face masks. Must have face masks. The other big point that kind of shifted our thinking in this area was we do not have to have a 6-foot spacing guidance. It's as much a physical distancing or social distancing as much as possible. And so those two things were very huge. Or they didn't limit the number of kids that we could have in a classroom. If they would have said 10 kids in a classroom or 15 kids in a classroom, that would have made our plan a little bit different. Or if they would have said 30 kids, no more than 30 in a classroom, that would also impact, but they did not. The middle school, let's start with the middle school general highlights. Approximately a 4-hour day with lunch at home. Class sizes range from 15 to 19. In-person instruction for core, some specials, PE, Spanish, and special education. So we are planning on bringing all kids to school, and this is every day, 5 days a week, if they choose, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Built-in office hours for students to connect with teachers when they are home. This is a shortened school day, so this would be what the state is calling a hybrid model, where we have some of the instruction in person, some of the instruction would be remote. We have to have 5 hours of instructional time built into our schedule each day. Some of that instructional time could be practice, math practice or ELA practice. It could be independent reading, and that could be done remotely or off campus at home. Whoops. Students assigned to one classroom for the day, and the teachers would move from room to room. So the kids would come in their group, however we break them up and assign them, and they're gonna go into a room, and that's where they will stay for the duration of their time. There might be a few exceptions. We're still working through some of that with special education pullout or other special services, but for the most part, kids will be in one classroom for that time. Of course, we're talking about movement breaks and washroom breaks and how to work all of that into that schedule as well. Staggered use of the bathrooms, entrance into the building and exit from the building. Those are all the details that we have yet to work through. Will allow us to seamlessly move to all remote with a rigorous and prescribed schedule. So the schedule that we've come up with would very easily slip right into a remote learning schedule where the kids could keep their same schedule with their teachers at that time to maintain that consistency. So that's a big positive with this. And all of our rooms that we're planning on using would be air conditioned. So it's great. And of course, we would take advantage of any outside time we could. That's part of the recommendations. Get outside as much as possible and get the kids moving as much as possible. But within that group, we're trying to eliminate cross intermingling with different groups of kids as much as possible. So if someone does come down with COVID or is test positive with COVID, only one group is impacted instead of an entire grade level or student body. So that's the middle school plan. The elementary plan, we talked about getting students in a little bit longer to keep them engaged in school a little bit longer. It's tougher for the elementary kids to do remote learning. We felt that the older the children are, the better, more independently they can do some of the remote learning activities. Whereas the younger kids need more hands-on instruction and as much instruction from adults as possible in the building as much as possible. So at this point, that's, again, hold all of these plans loosely because they could change. These are our initial thoughts. Students would attend for 5 hours with lunch in the classroom. That would be the biggest difference in why they would be in school longer, is that lunch in the classroom. Students would remain in one classroom with teachers. Teachers would be pushing in for different services and with specials, if we're able to bring, which we're planning on having a specials time with these kids, that specials teachers would be able to come into the class and teach general music or art or whatever that might be. Masks worn at all times in the building. The only exception to that is when we're eating. Of course, it's hard to eat through a mask, so that's kind of a no-brainer. Staggered start time for K2 and 3-5 to reduce the number of students on the bus and to allow for a staggered entrance into the building and exit. So we keep fewer kids in the hallway. We're able to distance them better, and it's still going to be a lot, and it's still going to be a challenge, but this will help us do this more effectively and with much less risk. Again, self-certification by staff and parents. So that's our general overall overview of the elementary. Busing, parents encouraged to transport their own children to school if possible, as they feel most comfortable. Students, we anticipate being on the bus with 20 students thereabouts or fewer in some cases, depending on how many parents that can transport their kids. Mask will be required on the bus at all times. Parents will be asked to choose one bus route. In the past, we could have kids be on one route on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and maybe they go to grandma's house on Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever the family situation is where they need alternate care. And we can't do that anymore with this because we don't want, again, we're trying to eliminate or reduce the number of groups that each child comes into contact with. There's been a lot of discussion about how to keep cohorts together. Child's care for after school, before and after school, we are planning on having that available to parents as well. Space will be limited based on our ability for space in the building, physical space, and also staffing. So that could be a challenge. We just don't know what that's going to look like yet. So that's going to have to be a little bit fluid, but we will do whatever we can to support parents that need that extra daycare. Again, we're looking at how can we keep those groups from intermingling with other groups of kids, different kids, and how can we schedule that with busing and align that with busing and the classroom to after school care to parent pickup. Those are some big challenges coming up. I also had a conversation with Lindenhurst Park District this week, and they have the possibility, they don't know yet, but possibility of offering some space for some of our parents as well if needed. So they're looking at different offsite locations to spread kids out in Lake Villa. And so if that gets worked out, they might be able to house Lake Villa students closer to their home school, which is wonderful. Remote learning option, we will give parents a remote learning option. So if parents are uncomfortable sending their kids to school under these conditions, because we cannot eliminate risk of contracting COVID, there's no guarantee of that, we would invite them to keep their kids home and have a remote learning option. We don't know what percentage of the population has that thought process at this time. I know when we surveyed back at the beginning of June, the first week in June, we wanted to get an idea, and it was 7% of our parents at that point knew that they would not be comfortable sending their kids back to school. I'm guessing for a variety of reasons that has changed at this point. There was also 27% that were undecided at that time. So they could go either way at that time. So if those two groups combined decided to keep their kids home, that's 34% of our kids. And that's aligning with other districts in the area. Grays Lake is right around 33% whose parents are deciding to keep their kids home. And so that would make sense.
So.
Oh, one more.
Yeah, no.
No, that's all right. The other thing is calendar considerations, because of all the staff training that's involved with just the process and the cleaning and the how do we use different apps for remote learning that we're going to need to be prepared for at any point in time and in school, and the new schedule. There's just a lot of training that we're going to have to go through with staff. So we will likely push back our current start time of first day of school from August 19th back to August 24th. That we still have a lot of discussion in that, so don't hold me to that at this point, but that's been our preliminary discussions and possibility, and I've been saying that for a while. It could go either way, and then I said, no, we're not going to go, we can't go any earlier, we're not going to be ready, but that date could be pushed back because we're not ready for either training, or we don't have the right equipment in school, or whatever reason, or the virus, we have another wave or surge, and we're unable to open because go back to phase 3 in our area. So
it's looking like August 24th.
possibly
But don't hold it to.
Right.
Right.
that's on the table.
So, first of all, I want to thank, the board had to move away from the goals that we thoughtfully set for the district in the fall and adopt emergency goals that included all of this planning for return to learn. And I want to thank Jason, the rest of the administration, and all of our staff for coming together on this. I know that usually folks have a little bit of time to rest and relax, and this has not been the case this year. If everyone knew how hard everyone was working, I think everyone would feel very proud to be in our district right now. We set out new goals, and I feel like you've all been very thoughtful about how to, I guess, working in especially the community engagement piece with the thought exchange and the Zoom sessions. And I just wanted to say I'm really grateful for that. Could you briefly, Jason, explain why you have moved away from an A/B model?
Yes.
I would appreciate that.
I'd love to. So I didn't know how far to go into detail with our thought process and where we came from to how we arrived at this, because it's a lot. But when we looked at the every other day model, there's many considerations for that. And there's few issues. One of the issues was where do kids go when they're not in school? And I'm not just saying because it's just a daycare issue. It's also an instructional issue. What are they doing on that day? And it's also, I have to check that, see if somebody's.
Okay.
It's also an instructional issue. How do we provide instruction? Who's going to provide instruction for that group? That became a very big hurdle to overcome that was a little bit overwhelming. And also for safety wise, if kids aren't in school with that same cohort, and let's say they go to the Lindenhurst Park District because they offer an alternative day schedule, is it any safer having 12 kids every other day, or is it better to have 19 kids in a classroom every day, the same group? Those are the kinds of questions that we're weighing, and neither one of those options is great. But when you put all of it together, the other one was going to be very, very burdensome for teachers. Every other day would be, I don't know if it was even possible looking from a teacher perspective, because you'd have kids on Monday with your A group on Monday, and your B group would be home. So you're kind of responsible for both of those, or someone has to be responsible for both of those groups. And then you have a third group of remote learners. How is that layered, and how do you keep them all consistently marching along at the same rate? And then do you do every other day to make it equal, or did we do a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday? Everybody's home, and it's kind of a catch-up day with 5 hours of remote instruction on a Friday. That means kids would only be in school 2 days a week at the most. Then what happens when you have Mondays off? Do you flip? You go Wednesday. It was just, there was a lot, and it became, the mountains seemed too high to climb.
The
and
every
the
other
time.
day in daycare and our ability to keep children in sort of pods of all the same kids really helped me to understand why the AB model would actually be more dangerous for the spread of disease. Even though we could keep the numbers down, if the kids on the B days were to go to an entirely different learning environment or daycare, then they would come back and they would be mixing with a whole other set of kids on their off days. So I thought that was helpful for me to understand. And that was actually from the CDC, wasn't it?
The state board
Yeah.
and the American Academy of Pediatrics, I think, mentioned that too. Again, none of the plans are fail-safe for by any stretch of the imagination. It's
Just
There.
can I also ask what are the what does the situation have to be to go back to an all remote learning? What would have to happen for us to go back to all remote learning?
I wish I knew the answer to that question. I do not.
So that's not clear yet.
That is not clear.
Okay.
It could be like proceeding back in the phases, right?
So that's one way.
Very good.
That could be it. Yeah, we could go from a phase 4 in our region to a phase 3, and that would do it. Or it could be within our school building, and we'd have to work with the Lake County Department of Public Health. I don't know if everybody's aware of what's happening in Lake Zurich and Stevenson with the football and cross country and volleyball, no, POMS. Anyway, their summer camps, they had several cases. And in Lake Zurich, they worked with the Lake County Department of Public Health and decided to shut down all their camps for 14 days, delay them and start again. And in Stevenson, and I think maybe even in Mundelein, where they had a case, or some other school where they had one case, and they were able to contact trace that young students' contacts. They were able to keep the camps open, but just isolate a certain handful of kids. So it's really situational at this point, and there's no clear guidance that I've seen. Whereas if it's one student or one teacher in one class, I know that whole class would likely be quarantined for 14 days and they would move over to remote learning. If it's 2 in a building, is that the point where we say we need to close the building and quarantine for 14 days because it's likely spread much further and quicker than we
Is
can
that something the
contain.
board should come to a position on based on what we know? I mean, in some ways it would be better to have clearer guidance from the state. In another way, though, it allows us, we know what pods our students are in, right? And we know, so it allows us a certain amount of discretion for our student body and the risk that we believe our students are in. So I guess we'll just take that on a case-by-case basis. What are you all comfortable with?
I would just say, up to this point, the Board of Education has been more of an informed role rather than consultative. I think to move to that and who would set the parameters changes. That takes us into a consultative role, and in fact, where we would be responsible for making that decision. I think these are very different and varying cases, right? You could have 2. You could have someone who's at one end of a building, and then one in the other end. Does that make sense to shut down the whole building? Who knows? I think, Jason, if you're keeping abreast of everything that's going on, which I believe you are, I don't know that it's the board's role to make that decision.
It's partly our role, and we have been a consulting. We have had a consulting position in this. We did by redoing our board goals.
Yeah, but that's really an assessment of Jason. The board goals were an assessment of Jason and what we
They're
decided
district,
was
no,
important
they're,
for
no,
community.
they're the board goals are district goals.
Right.
Right,
But then, right, so there's some assessment of what Jason's done, and then what we targeted, which was really not based on expertise in the area of managing COVID-19. It was more about asserting what's important, and that's the health and well-being of people. I
Right.
think it's a bit of a change in the role that we have played so far.
I don't think I think it's within the board's purview to look after the health of the student body. I was just wanting to get feedback from the board about what people's comfort levels are as far as, do we want to take it on a case-by-case basis, stay informed from Jason, and think about these things as we move forward? Or do we want to have some sort of, I guess something set out that we follow? I don't know. It just depends on what everybody else thinks. I would prefer to go with a case-by-case basis and be in communication with Jason and make those and just play it as we go. I think if we set out something that's too restrictive, then we'll be, depending on the
That's a concern.
circumstances. Yeah.
That's a concern. What I would say is, I think it'd be important for us to become more as informed as we can. So I don't know if there are resources that are being made available from ISBE or someone right now, or Illinois Department of Health, Lake County Department of Health, that could come and speak to us. I think it'd be important for us to be informed, certainly on that, and find out what kind of parameters they're setting up, at least at this time. And it's different because it could easily change.
I think that ultimately, I think we need to be connected well with our local health department. And I think if we set out some sort of specific guidelines, that all may be for nothing because the health department is saying, no, you're gonna follow this. So
That's right.
I think it's best that we keep in touch with the health department on these cases, and then obviously you keep us very well informed of what's happening. The case by case.
Jason, where did the number 2 originally come from? Was that the CDC?
CDC. Originally, but this was a month ago that I haven't seen any updates on that yet. Where they said, the second case within a building would constitute, their recommendation was to close the entire building.
So say we're in a situation where we open in the fall and we get a trickle of a case, maybe another case or two a few days later. We have the ability to call an emergency meeting to discuss it and take action right away.
You do.
But this is fully within the board's purview. I mean, it is. It's just what we want to recommend, and we want to communicate with Jason about what our comfort level is with things. And the guidance might be, let's be in contact with the Lake County Health Department and let the board know when new cases come into the building, and make sure that we are making these decisions as we go together. Does that make sense?
Certainly, I'd want to be informed.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think we would be. I mean, as
Yeah.
a parent, as a community member, I think we would be. But yeah, I really think that it should really be based on this number of resources that we have available.
I can understand feeling like putting a number like 2 maybe feeling a bit restrictive, but at the same token, there's going to be an immense amount of pressure if there's any confirmed cases at all. And there's going to be an alarming amount of people that become more uncomfortable just with one confirmed case in the building.
Yep, we've talked about that too. What happens when parents find out that there is a confirmed case in the building, or they hear from a neighbor that there's a neighbor who has COVID, will more kids pull their kids into the remote learning environment? So we have to be
Yeah,
prepared for that.
that's why I'm hesitant to lay out, here's the board laying out guidelines. I mean, I think we should be very cautious about that. Because I do think it's flexible and fluid, right? Say we have a classroom that's quarantined for 14 days. Well, day 12 into that, someone else in another classroom gets it. Me, honestly, that has me concerned. There may be a trend here, but they're probably not related whatsoever. Probably. Or maybe they are. Maybe it's a sibling, right? So I think we need to be flexible. We need to be educated as much as we can. And really, really lean on the Illinois Department of Health, the Lake County Department of Health. Really lean on those resources. So
I
Jim-
think, but that in itself is a guideline, right?
Yeah.
So we're not saying these specific numbers, but what
Yeah.
we're saying now, and we're communicating with him is important, that we want to be, first of all, kept abreast of it. We want to, take these decisions as they come, rather than necessarily ascribing to any strict guidelines. So I think that in itself is helpful for him to know. And does anybody else have any ideas? Because I would like for Jason to have an idea of where our comfort level is with this.
Well, I have a question. Do we have plans for testing students and staff on a regular basis and contact tracing? If somebody does test positive, who have they contacted and been in contact with, and where maybe, that sort of thing?
That would be the Lake County Department of Health.
Yep.
But-
We are not equipped for that, nor do I want to be necessarily. That's Lake County Department of Public Health comes in and does that for us. That's their job. There's contact tracers that they have trained to do that and to ask those questions.
Sure.
Will our nurses have some sort of role in that? I'm sure they will.
So can we firm up a plan from them on what they will do and what we can expect? And then also, I think testing is important because there's asymptomatic people coming by. And not everybody is going to self-report correctly. So we also need to do some testing on a regular basis.
Yep.
Is there training available for the nurses or any kind of, workshop from the health department?
There are workshops that they are sending me information about. Yes,
Jason,
we will get trained up.
in all the meetings that you've attended and discussing with other.
Excuse me, Jason, when we're talking about testing, are we talking about,
One second, Jim. Sean was in the middle of a
Yeah,
thought.
and you may not have been able to hear.
Yeah,
So-
Sean was in the middle of a thought, Jim.
Sean, it is difficult to hear you. I don't know if your mic is not close.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear him at all.
No, it was clear. That's
It's
okay.
It's okay.
So, in the meetings that you've gone to, have other districts talked about representatives from the Department of Health, either Illinois or Lake County, coming in and presenting to the district or the board?
They don't have the capacity for that.
Yeah.
We would have a hard time getting them to come to the Lake County superintendents. Lake County superintendents have designated one superintendent in Lake County to be the liaison for our group to the Lake County Health.
Wow.
They're busy.
So, given that tidbit, it's kind of mind-boggling to think that there would be a rapid response from them if we did have a confirmed case, especially in the fall with however many other districts within the county going. What would our time frame be? What would we do if they can't, if we have a confirmed case and they can't get out for 5 days? What would we do in the interim? We're shutting down anyway.
They would respond rapidly to that
So
How can we be sure, Carissa?
you can't.
because they have been.
Yeah, they've responded very well to other places and Lake Zurich. But what I'd like to say is all of this will be in the final plan. I just didn't present that tonight because I need to, there's a process for what I need information now and what we're focused on. So I don't want to dodge these questions, but please know that I've seen the protocols from other districts. I've seen what they do for contact tracing. All of this is out there and it will be in the final plan.
Jim, did you have a comment? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I just didn't hear Sean. I thought there was an opening. When it comes to testing, are we talking about conducting our own testing or being in touch with somebody in Lake County or some other entity to do the testing? That I kind of got lost in that thought.
Right. We would not be doing our own testing. We're not a medical facility. So
Okay, yeah, all right.
one of the protocols are if you have if the Lake County Department of Public Health contacts us and says that Jason Lind has been exposed significantly to someone who has COVID-19 due to their contact tracing, let's say it was somebody in my household, what I would have to do in order to come back to work or come back to school is have two negative
Right.
COVID tests within 24 hours. So you have one test and then you have a second test 24 hours later, and they both have to be negative in order for me to come back into the building. That's the recommended process for that piece for testing
Okay.
right
All right.
now. Now
Okay.
it takes about 7 days to get the results, so still out for a week, but
All right. Okay. Thanks.
yep.
Anybody have further questions right now?
Well, not on this, probably from early up in the slides. I was just wondering, you had mentioned that PE was going to be conducted when the kids are in school. What is that going to look like?
I would probably consult the PE teachers on that. They have some ideas. We will be able to take the kids outside and do activities. I've seen examples of what kids can do when they're separate, outside, apart, just to get some exercise.
Okay.
Fresh.
And does this also include having to wear a mask, or is there going to be some other process involved? So if the kids are running, for instance, are they going to have to be, wearing a mask?
Not if they're more than 6 feet apart. Outside.
Yeah, outdoors is really different from indoors, from what I understand.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Does anybody else have anything? Have you had responses to your email already from people? The one that went out?
Not too much.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jason, as far as we went over the numbers on the amount of students unsure, and at the point when you asked, I think you said in May, are unwilling to come back. What was the breakdown like with teachers who are uncomfortable to return versus teachers who are ready to go?
At that point, there was only 2 staff members, and I didn't separate out teachers and paraprofessionals who were not planning to come back at that point. But that was a month ago and things have changed significantly. So I don't know at this point. We'll be contacting teachers and asking them what they are planning again for the fall. So that's part of our communications plan that I'll talk about a little bit more too. It's a good question. We don't know for sure yet.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else before we move on?
So I can talk a little bit about the communications plan going up. Um, So we've been talking to teachers in small groups about this through representatives of each grade level and teams in different areas. But now we need to bring this out to the whole staff and with greater detail, like what does a teacher is going to want to know, what does their schedule look like? Really, that's where you get into the details. How's that going to work? How are you going to do PE? How are you going to do art in my class? Those kinds of questions. What will be offered? What are you gonna? How are you gonna keep me safe as far as the PPE and the cleaning schedules and all of that? Those are details that we have to work out and communicate out to the staff. So, but first, we kind of needed to get an idea of where we're headed with. Are we coming every day? Is it every other day? How many kids in the room? Can we do X, Y, and Z just to get something to talk about as a jumping off point? So it goes back to the teachers this week. We've been in dialogue with the union. I've talked to Mrs. McGill and Mrs. DeCourcy, who are the union president and vice president, as we have gone along in this and conversation and talked about teacher concerns and talked about what would work and what we can make work in the future. So that's been great. We've had dialogue with the community, with different members, not as a whole, not as everybody weighing in on a final plan, but we have had a lot of conversation and feedback along the way. Today we're at communicate this progress with the BOE, at least at this point, at this level. And then it's the next step is out to the community, probably Thursday-ish out to the community. And I'm going to ask them to commit to either a remote learning or a in-person learning schedule. So they will have to give enough detail, not all the details, but enough detail that people can make an informed choice. Other districts have they did it the opposite way, where they surveyed and asked parents to commit first, and then they started rolling out the plan, which would be easier for us to plan actually, because we'd know what we're dealing with. But on the other hand, it's harder to know what you're choosing between without at least some information. So we're trying to balance that out.
I would say almost impossible.
And there's no right or wrong way. It's just the way we're trying to do it. So it's going to be messy. For the last week was very intense, and I'm anticipating that it's going to get more intense as we get closer and closer to that start of school, until we actually see what people will decide to do. And predicting human behavior in this environment is tricky and understandable. It's a lot of different information to sort through, and you don't know which sources have good information, which ones are bad information, and what part is real and what part is just media hype. Or it's a challenge for parents. I get it and I understand. And what I'm hoping is that everybody's respectful of each other and their decisions. Whether you decide to stay home or decide to go to school, that's a personal decision and to be respected, and not say, well, that's a political statement. No, that's a personal choice about your kids. We're not going to, whether you decide to stay home means one thing or you decide to send your kids to school. No, that's a personal choice, and it doesn't mean you love your kids any less or more either way. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, from what I've heard from a lot of people, it seems to be based more on, do you have immunocompromised people at home?
Right.
Are you caring for sick parents? Do the kids often stay with your parents, your elderly parents, that kind of thing, and much less to do with anything like that. At least that's what I've come to understand when I talk to them.
Right. Everybody has a different scenario and different level of safety risk tolerance in this area and comfort level. So we're going to be okay.
Minimize the middle box.
I could minimize the middle box so the people in this room can see. Maybe I can't. It's a little better.
Thank you.
So we're gonna, again, Thursday-ish, hopefully, maybe Friday, to ask parents to choose between remote learning and in-person learning. Ask them to identify busing needs so we can start planning that. And ask them to identify childcare needs so we can start planning that. So each of those is a risk. So if kids are going in school on a bus and need childcare, then that's the highest risk for spreading the disease that there is for parents. So anything less than that, you reduce your risk. So if you're going to transport your child to school, that's less risk of contracting the disease. So if you're less worried about your child contracting it, maybe you make different choices. Or if you're more worried, the safest is to stay home. There's no question about that. So it's just a lot of choices. We want to give people as many choices as possible. Same with staff. Staff have choices to make too.
So my question is, if people choose the in-person learning environment and then something changes, can they switch to remote and vice versa?
That's been a lot of discussion. Now, if somebody, you can't, I don't think you can go from remote to in-person, except maybe at semester. We'll ask people to commit for at least a semester because we may not have a spot. Going the other way, depending on how many people we have and the way the sections break out, that's more possible. But obviously we can't force people to come into the school building. So we're going to support parents the best we can in their choices. But
What
we'd
about
prefer
busing?
busing.
If people sign up for, say, the bus, but then they most of the time take their kids to school.
I don't know.
I'm sorry to mean to be giving.
No, I know.
We've had that discussion.
We've had the discussion many times. We go round and round on what.
It's the same principle. If
Mhm.
you sign up for busing and choose not to.
We
not so
can't
much
stop it.
impact. However, if you choose always bring your child to school and then you want to start busing, there's different considerations with that number.
Except if they live more than a mile and a half away from the school, we're required to bus them. if they
Right,
bus
yeah.
it. So whether there's a special dispensation for now or not, I don't know.
What we might ask parents to do is give us extended time to put busing together because we want to make sure we keep as few kids on the bus as possible. I don't know. And if you can drive, if parents can drive, if we can drive our kids, please do, because that adds a level of safety. And we don't want to take up a seat where somebody else might need it in the future. Not that we won't. We're not going to say no to anybody for busing. We can't. Like Dr. John said, we have to bus for more than a mile and a half away. But yeah, I think we'll do the best we can.
Okay. Further questions from anyone or discussion? All the questions
Yeah, I
on-
mean, just really quick. I mean, every bullet point on every slide is a Pandora's box of what ifs. So, I mean, first of all, Jason, I commend you for all of your hard work on this. It's impressive. But you know, it's also it's also intense. There's a lot of things that could potentially intermingle, go wrong. There's a lot of, I feel like, I don't want to say liability, but it's anxiety about what could potentially come.
Yep, it's pretty heavy.
Okay.
Can I say something? One thing.
Yes.
I do also want to just say thank you to to the administrators and the teachers and, fellow board members, because none of this is easy. I mean, I'm just continuing to sit back and listen, in awe, because there is so much. So I just know that in the community, sometimes I'm asked the question, where does the board stand on this, and what would we recommend of sorts? And, that's a very slippery slope to answer it with just one way. But I do try to just continue to reinforce the fact that the staff is doing everything possible to remain abreast of the information and to be on the front lines, in terms of planning. So I know that the one thing we can do, which is not tremendous, but I think it can be impactful, is just reassuring people that everyone is working and doing all that can be done, and that as soon as information is made available, that information will then be disseminated out. So just a commentary more than a question.
That's a great point. I mean, I think to contextualize it a little bit, when Jason was talking to Denise and me the other day, he said that on the summers where they redo the bus routes, that is a major undertaking, and it takes weeks, and because there are so many things at play. So if you can imagine, just that is so challenging. And then we've got this, we're totally reimagining how we're getting our kids to school this year. That's just one tiny aspect of this whole plan. So the number of hours that are going into this from our entire staff is incredible. It's a Herculean effort, and I know the community is grateful. We're all grateful.
Yep.
The community has a way of coming together during these times.
We do. It's a great place to be, and I'm hopeful. I think we can make it work. Mm-hmm. And the staff is working hard. The teachers are working hard. They're asking the right questions and researching, and what can I do? How is this going to look already? So I think it can be done. It's going to be hard, real hard, but it can be done.
We've got our teachers on our side. That's a big deal.
Yep.
Yep.
And parents pitching in.
Oh, yeah.
So it's been great.
Yeah, if anybody can do it, we can.
Right.
All right, on to Superintendent District Conduct Goals Update. Would you please go through this?
Yes, I will go through this
with everyone. So just to remind you, this would have been the fall goals, but we scrapped the fall goals when we had to go to completely remote learning. We reestablished what the new 2019-2020 goals should be based on the emergency conditions. We're now evaluating, Dr. Lind, on those goals. And by evaluating Dr. Lind, I mean it's really evaluating the district and how we're moving forward and handling this. And this gives him a chance to get feedback from us, and for us to give, and for him to, it's a communication piece as well as an evaluation. So this is the part we redid the goals, then we redid the evaluation tool. Then he is going, the way the schedule works, he is going through his responses to the evaluation tool. And then we will, you all have the tools, access to the tools at home. So between this meeting and the next meeting, please fill that out, that Google form.
I think I actually have to invite everybody to take the survey so that we have it all compiled in one. So
just kidding. Denise is going to send out
an invitation. I will send the invitation out so that everybody between now and the next meeting.
Thank you, Denise. And what we'll do is in this interim time, we're asking everybody to fill out that Google form. It will all be collected. After the next meeting, we'll have a closed session where we have a discussion, and then I will go and share feedback with Jason afterward. Okay? Is everyone clear on that? Great. Okay. Take it away.
All right. You all have access to this doc. I shared it with you this weekend, so you can go in more detail, and there's links on there, but I just wanted to briefly show it. I know it's we're running long already, and we have some more to discuss. So goal number 1 was define and continuously monitor the welfare needs of the community staff and establish systems of support and respond to them. Lunch and breakfast to all students that request. So we did that. Anybody that wanted lunch and breakfast got it. Dr. John set that up within the first week of us closing, and it was amazing. Between 250 and 750 meals per week were distributed. So over the course of 3 months, that's pretty good work. Informational emails to the community at least weekly. Principals send an email every Friday, and they've continued that this summer. And then additional emails went out on those dates. Thought exchanges, we did 6 of them with community and staff. Coordinate with governmental and community resources. So we talked with Lindenhurst Police Department and Park District, Lake County superintendents, at least weekly, sometimes more than that. And same with the feeder schools from Warren, Grays Lake, and District 117. Melbourne is uniquely positioned in the county of having a lot of articulation opportunities with other school districts. So we articulate with lots of people. I think I haven't counted in a while, but it's more than 9 school districts out of the 46 that we articulate with directly, which is, it's kind of nice. It makes for more meetings, but it also lets me know what's happening in our area quite frequently. Goal number 2 is establish a remote learning plan. That was more for the end of the school year. I know that the teachers got busy right away and said, okay, what do we need to get our kids to know by the end of the year? They put those plans into place, and I have some samples here of what we're going to use for next year as far as state standards, but that we use the same idea for this year in saying, hey, this is what our kids need to know for the end of the year, and how can we get them there? And they met with the principals, and they met with elementary Melissa Lawrence, who worked with teachers on the ELA standards and the power standards. Research best practices. Again, here's a sample of Melissa Lawrence. She's one of our coaches who sent out coaching connections. I know Suzanne DeCourcy also sends out a coaching similar pamphlet for tech to help teachers and provide resources and say, hey, do you remember we have this resource and this resource? How can I support you and help? Along with lots and lots of direct help. Consultation with staff and unions, lots of meetings, and we will continue with that. To prioritize the well-being of students, staff, and families. So we're tried to help families as much as possible, not just with food, but with, hey, how can we help? We're here for you. Some of those Zoom meetings, there are families that had concerns and could see the stress level. Tried to support them through that and reach out as much as possible. That's difficult, and that's going to be more important even next year. So we will continue with that. Goal 3, provide academic, emotional, behavioral supports for students with special needs. Elizabeth did a great job. Mrs. Keefe is our special ed director, did a great job of staying up to date on everything that was special ed related and what we were required to do and what we could do and best practices. And she was on webinars and communicating with teachers and did a great job stepping into that, continuing that role. Compliance, yes, there's lots of compliance, and we were on up to date on everything. So did a great job there. Goal 4, access to remote learning 100% by May 1st. We had 100% of our students that wanted internet had it if we knew about it. And if we saw that kids weren't logging in or weren't completing assignments, we contacted them to make sure that they had access. Goal 5, ensure student engagement in remote learning. This I think is a great goal and a victory lap for our teachers. 95% of all students in at least one learning activity by May 1st. We're way beyond that. And in fact, throughout the entire process, I believe we were way over 3 or more learning activities per student. 95% of our kids did some engagement with 3 or more learning activities for sure. 98% at Milburn Elementary School and 96% at Milburn Middle School. Now, I'll say a caveat, that doesn't mean that everybody did a great job. Students, there were some students that didn't necessarily participate or complete assignments to typical standards or engage in all of them. But when we said that they completed 60% of their assignments and got a passing grade, that was what we used to measure engagement, and our kids were engaged at some level, which is pretty amazing given the circumstances. Next year, our expectations will go higher for remote learning. The state expectations are higher. We're not in an emergency situation. This is a sustained, and we're going to have to lean on our kids a little bit harder as far as getting in some of their assignments and participating in classes. We will also get better at how do we engage the kids and keep them interested in class as well. Goal 6, create comprehensive reentry plan, which was tonight. The first phase, this is not completed. We have a long way to go. But tonight was the first discussion on this, and we'll continue to clearly communicate the next steps as we go. More Zoom meetings, more parent feedback, more thought exchanges after we set out. Probably, I'll give parents a week or so to respond to the initial Google form is what I'll probably send out, or that is what I'll send out as a Google form, because I need their name attached to what they're going to decide to do and grade level, because we'll need to know where our kids are going to be staying at home. Is it kindergarten, first grade, more likely to stay home or more likely to go to school, or middle school? Well, that's all to be figured out. That's what I need to know. So then hopefully we match the teachers with the same survey to say, okay, if we have 20 students who want to stay home and we have a teacher that wants to stay home and feels more comfortable, let's match up that group. Will it all work out nice and neatly? Probably not, but we can get it figured out to the best of our ability. Okay, any questions on that?
This was helpful for us to look back and see all that has been done. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Lynn right now about his assessment of where things stand and any of that? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as a no. It's very funny when people aren't in the room to try and assess. Okay, so we're on to the district leadership team proposal. Take it away.
Oh, no. Well, hang on. It'll take me just a second to set this. Oh, there it is. I got it. Perfect. Now I've got it.
Can we say a few things about what it is?
Yes, I will introduce it first while I'm trying to prepare the technology piece. There we go. Now I've got it. Now I know what I'm sort of doing. So what we were proposing, we've talked for actually over the course of the last couple of years, how do we implement new ideas? How do we support our staff? How do we build leadership from within our building with our talented staff and give more teachers and more people an opportunity to grow with leadership? So we've been bouncing around ideas for a long time on how we could do that. And we finally put together a proposal for what we see might work for us. It was developed by a team of leaders. And I'll let Jake and Ben explain this. We're going to watch a presentation by them. They're modeling an asynchronous learning environment. And I've just got to do a couple little things here. To make this work effectively, and then they'll take it away. Let's see, I'm going to do this. I'm going to let them get started. Of course, when you want the technology to work, it doesn't always cooperate.
I'd say that's actually a pretty high correlation.
So I'm going to try that. What's that? Tried it twice today.
Mm-hmm. Gonna work both times.
It worked splendidly.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're not having a internet challenge right now.
Are we having an internet moment? Was that on when you did it before?
Yes and
Oh, it
no.
was? Okay.
Okay, it seems to be working. Now I'm going to go back. Screen share.
We're recording. Right now? Pretty sure. Hello, board members and community. We're recording. Right now? Pretty sure. Hello, board members and community.
Mr. Walshire and I, Jake Jorgensen, we're going to share some information with you about team leader proposals that we have for the district. The agenda will consist of sharing the committee members that were involved in researching this, the purpose, some reference to state code, the return to learn, guidance from ISBE, job description, qualifications, expectations, and a proposal for team leaders at Milburn. The development team consisted of Carissa Berg, Carrie Gedville, Jake Jorgensen, Kristen Kao, Jason Lind, Melissa Lawrence, Angie Richardson, Jen Steinert, and Ben Walshire.
So our team created a purpose for developing our team leaders, and that purpose was, and this is our official statement, the purpose of the team leader is to facilitate communication between administration and instructional staff and lead the team's work by mobilizing and energizing others with the goal of improving the school's performance of its critical responsibilities related to teaching and learning as we focus on the strategic plan and building goals. So again, this was developed jointly with the development team. And as a reference, as part of our development, we also reference some aspects that the state also recommends. And so as you can see in this slide, this is actually from the Illinois Code and what they state what a teacher leader is. So you can spend a few moments reading through that if you have the PowerPoint in front of you. But this showed us some guidance on how we can start developing our leadership, a team here at Milburn. In addition to that, recently we were given the ISB guidance documents for our students to return in the fall. And in that guidance document, also recommended utilizing our teacher leaders within the building in help facilitating our return to learn with our students. So the next couple of slides shows what the guidance document suggested for schools and how we can utilize teacher leaders in having our students return to learn in the fall. And these are recommendations of teacher leaders and what they would be doing in reference to the guidance document that, again, ISB sent out to area schools.
So the job description that was developed by our research team highlights important roles. So bulleted points there, coordinating and leading the work of their team, serving as a contributing member of the principal's team, serve as a key communicator link between the administration and the faculty, enhance the capacity of their team to work interdependently to achieve common goals for which team members hold themselves mutually accountable, lead the team in preparing and utilizing team norms and planning agendas, lead the team of teams in analyzing and improving student learning data, seek out and experiment with best practice, lead the collaborative development and attainment of learning improvement goals, identifying and communicating professional development needs, ensure that the team focuses on the critical questions and practices associated with improving student learning in a manner that is reflective of the highest quality. We're going to go to the next slide. So the qualifications of people that would fill this role, they would have to demonstrate a record of effectiveness in their own teaching. They would have needed to earn the recognition and respect of their peers. Team leaders must have excellent planning and organizational skills, as well as the ability to work with others, must model a desire and willingness to continue to learn, and constantly seeking ways to first improve themselves so that they can more effectively lead their teams.
So as we start looking at the expectations of the team leader, here are the expectations our development team created. Creating goals followed by action steps that correlate with the vision and mission of the district. Work with coaches and administrators on recommendations regarding professional development. Work with teachers as mentors and help provide meaningful feedback regarding blended learning, e-learning, or socially distanced in-person learning. Create opportunities for other teachers to lead. Serve as mentors to teachers new to the district as well as those new to the profession. With assistance from administrators and coaches, work with mentees and other teachers to utilize research-based methods, best practices, and data analysis to improve student learning. have the opportunity to seek out and receive teacher leadership professional development in addition to basic training on technology, instructional methods, and other aspects that may need professional development. Bi-weekly meetings with the leadership team, attend summer training or meetings not to exceed 2 days over the summer, possibly additional professional development as needed. And we are asking for a 2-year commitment with our team leaders. So as we look at our proposal for our Milburn team leaders, we're looking at a total of 17 total members, and this is the breakdown of those members. At the elementary, we're looking at 11 team leaders, and those 11 team leaders would be 6 members from each grade level team, which includes our special ed population, special ed staff in those grade level teams. 1 person representing related services, such as our psychologists, our OT, PT, which means occupational therapists and physical therapists, social work, speech, and early childhood. 1 member representing specials, 1 member representing the student support team, which involves RTI, AIM, ELL, 1 instructional coach, and 1 technology coach.
And the other 6 members would be rounded out by the middle school staff, 3 coming from grade levels, 1 from specials, 1 from special education, and 1 from the tech coach world. And that would total the 17 members, so that both buildings are represented and all departments have a representation from their team leader. I think we're going to go on to the next slide.
And so as we start looking at the proposed stipend amounts that will be associated with these team leader positions, we start looking at the breakdown of the meetings that we have. So if we'll be looking at bi-monthly meetings for 9 months, looking at what we typically pay our staff members for after school committees, we're looking at a dollar amount of $450 for those bi-monthly meetings for 9 months. 2 days of summer meetings, which would total $350. And then having a stipend amount that's associated with being the facilitator of their team meeting, which we are proposing $750 for that role. So when you put those numbers together, we are looking at an individual stipend amount to be $1,550. With 17 members, the total annual cost that we're proposing for the district would be $26,350 for the team leader positions at Milburn. And we're always welcome to answer any questions you may have. I know Dr. Lynn is there to answer any of your questions, but feel free to reach out to us between now and the regular board meeting if you have any specifics on the team leader positions. Thank you for considering and for your time. Thank you, Jake.
You're welcome, Ben.
All right, there you have it.
Isn't there some question as to whether this model will be able to be employed this year considering the class size that we're trying to meet?
No. Would be not respective of class size or impacting on that. I think it's more important this year because of all the changes in the communication aspect and how are we going to develop that goals.
Excuse me, Jason, I think your volume is turned down. It's a little tough to hear you.
Thanks, Jim. It is, in fact. Is that better, Jim?
You betcha. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does anybody have questions on this? I think this is kind of what's being recommended these days, yeah? I mean,
Yeah.
From what I understand of other districts, people I've talked to in other districts, this has become a pretty, I don't know.
It's how do you structure in any organization, how you build leadership and build capacity for change without stressing everybody out. There's always plenty of stress to go around, but how do you make those communication pieces and you really develop your staff to be more effective. And I'm hoping out of this we get future possibly administrators or just teacher leaders who are interested in growing as individuals. So I'm excited about that. To formalize this. There are people who have done this role in our district and taken up teacher leadership roles already. And we have many leaders on within our teaching ranks and within all levels of the organization. It's just a matter of formalizing that and bringing that to light, recognizing them.
Does anybody have questions? Over there in the Zoom gallery? I don't. Okay. What is this position vis-a-vis, like, say, a curriculum director? What is that? Is this an instead of, or is it a completely different thing?
It's a completely different thing.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And we are on to discuss the approval of consultation and professional development contract for trauma-informed restorative teaching practices in the amount of $20,000.
Okay. So understanding that this year, first of all, last year we started talking about trauma-informed practices with our teaching staff and our PBIS system, and really taking a look at how we are supporting kids. Thankfully, we started that process last year. Now it's becoming even more important as we look at social, emotional health and well-being in our society, not just amongst our children, but amongst our staff and parents. I'm really concerned about it. So we want to continue that work. And how do we best support kids? How do we teach them how to be resilient? How do we improve resilience amongst our staff? And so we'd like to work with Allie Hearn again. We had her for 10 days contracted last year. We'd like to add, we didn't use those 5 days because of the COVID. 5 of those 10 days last year, we'd like to move that into this year and then add another 5 days or 10 days to her contract to work with us. And she's very flexible. She can work 1 hour at a time. She's meeting with the administration again tomorrow to talk about some of these practices and how we can work that into our staff development this year. So we'd like to continue that work with her. We have Title II money, which is federal government money that we use every year, and that's specifically only for staff development. So sometimes that's easy to use up and we go way over that, and sometimes it's hard to find enough money to put into that. So most of that amount, if not all of it, should be covered by Title II grant money this year.
Could you explain to everyone what trauma-informed practices are and why we would adopt them?
Wow, put me on the spot.
Sorry.
Well, trauma has to do with cumulative trauma or cumulative stress theory is the basis behind it. But Allie talks about it, and a lot of people talk about it in the form of ACEs, ACE, adverse childhood experiences. So if a child has had one adverse childhood experience, perhaps the loss of a parent or parents going through a divorce or loss of a sibling, those are adverse childhood experiences. That could be one. If they have a second one within a certain time period, that would be 2. When we start to see kids move from 2 to 3 or 1 to 2, there's certain behaviors that start to escalate, and lifetime impacts on their health occur because of those adverse childhood experiences. So what kind of teaching practices can we use to acknowledge those, and how do we support those kids in our classroom so we don't re-traumatize them and further inflame their stress levels? So that's what we're talking about in a nutshell. And I'm fumbling over it more so than I should be, but that's the general idea, is how do we reduce that trauma and how do we restore those kids? So restorative practice is part of it. How do we restore kids to belonging in a class and so they feel comfortable? Some kids we know, if you step in behind a kid and put their hand on their shoulder, some kids will do this. Well, maybe they've had some violence in their families in the past that makes them especially susceptible to touch. We have to know that and look for some of those signs of that, so we can be more cognizant and more graceful about how we treat those kids. Not let them, we're not talking about lowering standards, we're talking about how can we support these kids emotionally so that they're ready to learn and can absorb the content. Because we know cortisol levels and all kinds of research and science on adrenaline. We know we can't learn and gather new information and integrate new information if we are stressed. We can't listen if our stress levels are higher. So we have to get kids into a position of readiness to learn, and that's talking about breathing techniques. We talked about different exercises that we can do to get kids ready to learn that help reduce those levels. So it covers a whole wide range, and I'm rambling on again, but that's it.
No, I think that was clear.
There's not,
No, totally clear.
it's good stuff.
Yeah, helping to learn and about what trauma is and the effects it has on kids and things you can do to mitigate it in the classroom. I think it's important.
And at this point, all of our kids have had some trauma in the last month. So everybody's going to be impacted by this shutdown, but all kids, 100%, could count this as an adverse childhood experience.
It's more important than ever to have this training. Probably. Right. Does anybody have questions about this? Okay. Future agenda items, press policy updates, review of board self-governance goals and draft of revised goals 2019 to 2020, review of board agreements, construction change orders, review and revise if necessary board agenda calendar, review a superintendent evaluation goal, board self-evaluation with IASB. What is diverse staff? What is that?
We talked about a report on diverse staff hiring.
Yes. So staff diversity report.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to add right now to the?
Just that, again, a reminder, the press policy updates, the two that we discussed, 4-20 and 4-30. 4-100, I think, is commonly understood. That's just the exclusion of the grades 9 through 12.
So 4-20 and 4-30.
Right.
All right. Anybody else have anything out there in Zoom land? Okay. Then on to the superintendent. I think we've got the superintendent report, but there's probably more.
I'm sure we're done.
Business office report.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. On the property tax collection, just to kind of put it in focus with dollars. And granted, last year we got our last payment before this meeting would have occurred June 27th. This year we actually got one July 2nd. So we're down about 311,000 if I look at the 2% difference between last year and this year. So that's not nearly as bad as it could have been with the 4 payments for property taxes. Because that was one of the concerns that I had, at least when they looked at spreading it out, that it was going to mean that we were going to have a fairly significant amount of money that we were going to be shorted up front. Okay. So it's not as bad as I thought. But I'll just keep updating this spreadsheet every meeting so you can kind of see where we're at.
And we will eventually get that 311,000.
Right, but I think the last payment is due, is it October or November? November 7th, I think. So you know, normally by the end of September, we have most of our money. So, and usually by the middle of July, we've got the majority of our money from the spring collection. But now some of that won't come until August 7th. People don't have to pay it till August 7th, so we should get it by the end of August. And then there's also September 7th and November 7th payment, if they're paying 4 payments. Audit update, we're going to be starting that July 27th, which will be interesting. We've had a Zoom meeting to discuss it, some things with the auditor. They're going to be sending us some things that they need us to start collecting for them, as well as some things that they told us at our meeting. And then in addition to the audit, then there's also GASB 7. This year it's GASB 74 and 75 audit that's done that looks at post-retirement expenses. So they calculate what that cost is to the district, and that goes in as unfunded post-retirement, something or other. Construction update. I think the wayfinding sign is the only thing that I don't think has happened yet, are the handicap signs in the parking lot of the elementary building. And then there's some seating and some other work that has to be done in the where we did the concrete bus parking area. And then the work on the house, the windows and the deck is going to start sometime this week. I don't have an exact date yet, but that's good. The other thing with the plow truck, because of the timing of the pandemic and when we approved it, I guess the state never fully awarded the contract, even though they were supposed to, and with the pandemic, they never did. And then of course the Ford plant shut down, and so we're at this point, we have a couple options. We can either limp along for this season, which I think is the direction I'm leaning, or we could do a public bid, which means we'd have to, you know, send it out to lots of different people and try to get bids, but that requires writing up the specifications, exactly what you need, etc. So I think if we can get by one more season with the truck that we have, we're probably better off, and then look at this again once we get into late fall, early December, January type time frame.
That's too bad. It's such a good price.
It'll still be a very good price regardless. But, and then a couple other things with unemployment. Carly and I attended a webinar where they had one of the attorneys from the Illinois Department of Employment Security, and kind of explained the process. So there will be a few people, probably our substitutes for the springtime, but from March through the end of the school year, that will be responsible for those costs. But pretty much everything else, as long as they are paraprofessionals, bus drivers, any non-academic personnel, we should, one way or the other, end up getting all of our costs back. We may have to pay half of the cost and then wait for reimbursement from the feds. Or I know there was a bill pending in Congress that would have just not had them, they would have set the money, they would then send the money directly to the state. So if they do that, that's the easiest for us. We're going to have to provide them with some additional information so that they can verify, make sure that some of our academic teaching staff don't get unemployment over the summer. But even for the non-academic employees, I believe that actually goes till December 31st of this year. So when we have our, I don't know if Thanksgiving counts, but I know for sure part of that winter break would count, where they would still be able to collect unemployment.
Really?
If they're not working.
Even though they have vacation days.
Well, they really don't have vacation days.
Okay.
They only get paid for the days. There are some that are paid holidays.
Okay.
So I don't believe they would be paid for those. But the days that they're not paid for, I believe they're eligible. And then there's one other piece, and I apologize when Jason was talking about the slowness of the internet. It made me realize I'm working with Ernest and a consultant on the upgrade that we were supposed to have to our internet that was supposed to occur in July of 2019. They actually put the circuit in, but now he's telling me we need some additional hardware to make it work properly. So I'm just giving you a heads up that I'm still trying to flush it out because we got a price from one company, and then I went to CDW to get another price. The CDW price was higher, but I'm still trying to find out if the original cost I got was for refurbished equipment or regular equipment. And then there's also some possible E-rate money that we could get, but we'd have to get it through CDW. So all I'm saying is you may see something on the next agenda, and I'll try as soon as I can contact Ernest and talk with Jason to get that information out to you. But I think we're roughly talking in the $10,000 to $14,000 range. But it is important, especially for those that are on remote, if we're going to be doing it from here, that we want to have that speed. So I'll let you know. But I thought I had it all straightened out, and then I got the quote from CDW, and then I questioned why it was so high. And she said, well, this one piece of equipment, the list price is $23,000, and I think their price to us was $12,000 or $14,000. But the one that we've gotten from another company was lower, but I'm guessing it probably is either used or refurbished. So I need to flush out the details on that. So we'll get more information.
Just one
pretty
little
soon.
thing, it takes all this
Oh, it does.
incredible amount of time.
It does, but this is a very important piece. We want that speed.
More than ever, right? Okay, does anybody have questions for Dr. Johns?
Just the expenditures over 10,000 you sent out on the board report.
Right.
Is that something we'll be voting on next?
No, that was on this agenda.
This, okay.
And it's more than just like one piece. It will actually encompass the entire.
So this is part, okay, so this is part of what I probably don't.
Yeah, that was the 10,000.
Okay.
part. And then the rest of it is to pay for the thermometers, and I think we ordered another 2,000 masks and,
Okay.
you know, some additional disinfectant.
I
I
couldn't-
ordered
I didn't know if the.
4
shields
more
were separate.
electrostatic sprayers. So a lot of just small items like that that we're gonna need if we're gonna be able to quickly go, and we probably will need other things too. We're looking now at the decals for the floor and the signage. Some of the things we'll be able to print and just post ourselves. And I'm guessing the things that we're gonna put on the floor, we're probably gonna need to buy something so that it's not like coming off, you know, so it's designed to actually stick there. I mean, I've seen some places where they've used, you know, colored tape or whatever, and it just doesn't have the same effect as something that is printed and looks official.
I am glad we're getting a jump on these things because I'm pretty sure that once the school year starts, there will be a delay in getting items.
And even
So-
some of the items that we've ordered are on back order. So, you know, we've tried throughout the spring and the early summer to periodically just place some additional orders, knowing that we needed to. And especially now with the number of cases in the south increasing, that's gonna put more of a strain on the system of what we'll be able to get. But we already have, you know, I've worked with Kelly for the school health offices to get gloves ordered. We actually did that a couple weeks ago. We ordered that extra 2,000 masks, although that really won't last that long, even though it sounds like a huge number. It's gonna go quick. So, and then there's some other things that I'm investigating, trying to look at where we can find some, the one that I need to research a little more is even, you know, if we want to get some child-sized disposable masks. I don't even know if they make those, but I know they make the child size.
I think I just
reusable
ordered
masks.
some, so I will,
If you've got a resource, something.
yes, and I will bring it by.
Okay, sounds
If
good.
it looks reasonable, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I could do the review.
And then I did order just as a sample, or I ordered a couple different kinds of what were listed as reusable face shields. Because looking at the bus drivers especially, that they'll need something, but we'll also have other people in the building that may need that as well, in addition to their masks. But if we can get one that, you know, could be cleaned in between uses so that you're not using it and then throwing it away. And you can't really tell by the pictures. You know, I know the first masks that I did, the first cloth masks that I ordered, they looked really neat in the picture. There was almost nothing to them. I mean, they were a mask and they did work, and we have very few of them left, but I would never order those again.
My favorite are the kind that you get and then you really can't breathe through them.
But those are the better ones. Because if you can't breathe through it, it's something.
No, it wasn't for that reason.
Oh,
It was
okay, I
because
got
it was the material kind of goes up your nose.
Oh, no.
Didn't work. It was a bummer. So, sorry, TMI. On to board reports. I think we've seen everyone's reports. I mean, does anybody have anything? Okay. Do we have closed session? Yes. 4, 2, okay. All right, unless anybody has anything else to ask questions about, I'd like to move that we adjourn for the negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Casper Marchlet,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Guziak,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Lori.
Yes.
Okay, that concludes our broadcast evening. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We're going into closed session. See you next time.